I was convicted of a cybercrime using evidence from a field I have worked in for 14 years, analyzed by someone who made a fundamental error that I identified in 40 minutes when I was finally shown the report. 40 minutes. That is how long it took me, sitting in a prison visiting room with a printed copy of the forensic analysis that had been used against me to find the mistake. I had been asking to see the full report for 9 months. My original attorney had filed for it 3 times. Each request had been acknowledged and deferred. The report had not been provided until my second attorney made a formal demand under discovery rules. By the time I read it, I had been convicted for 11 months. The mistake was in the timestamp interpretation. The forensic officer had read a UTC timestamp as local time, a single conversion error that placed the activity in question during hours when I had been demonstrably elsewhere. Every subsequent conclusion in his analysis rested on that interpretation. The entire case against me had been built on a timestamp that had been read in the wrong time zone. My laptop, my phone, my accounts, all of it had been used as evidence. All of it had been interpreted through the lens of a UTC timestamp read as Eastern Standard Time. The 6-hour difference between those two interpretations is the difference between activity during my working day and activity at 3 in the morning when I was asleep. The retention anchor, the custody sergeant who processed my booking on the night of my arrest, had written a note in the custody log. His name was Torres, 22 years in the department, careful, and bothered enough by something he observed during my interview to document it without being asked to. The note read, "Subject appeared genuinely confused by charges. Demonstrated technical knowledge inconsistent with the described conduct. Recommend review of forensic basis before proceeding." The note had been in the custody log for 16 months. Nobody had acted on it. My name is Kevin. I am a network security consultant. I have held clearances. I have worked on the forensic side of investigations myself, which is the specific irony of my situation that I find most difficult to express without sounding like I am making a point rather than stating a fact. I know what proper forensic methodology looks like. I know what timestamp conversion errors look like. I know, because I have spent 14 years in this field, exactly what the officer got wrong and exactly why it matters. I said this to my original attorney. I said it clearly, with documentation, in our second meeting. He said he understood and that the forensic evidence would be challenged at trial. It was not challenged at trial. It was presented uncontested by a prosecution expert who had 20 years of credibility in the field and a confidence of delivery that made the time zone error invisible to a jury that had no reason to question it. The jury convicted in 2 hours and 40 minutes. My attorney was replaced before the appeal. The new attorney, a woman named Diana, appellate specialist, with the forensic patience of someone who reads reports the way I read reports, found the time zone error on her second read-through. She called me the next morning. She said, "This is wrong. It is demonstrably, documentably wrong. And we have Sergeant Torres's note from day 1 saying something was off." She said, "We are going to the Court of Appeals and we are going to win this specific argument." She said, "The question is, what comes after? The what comes after is the part we are still working on." But let me tell you what the appeal produced first. The midpoint is the appeal hearing itself. A 3-judge panel, a Thursday morning in November, a courtroom that smelled of old paper, and central heating running too hard for the size of the room. Diana presented the UTC error with the specific economy of someone who knows the argument is correct and does not need to embellish it. She showed the timestamp. She showed the conversion. She showed what the correct interpretation produced and what the incorrect interpretation had produced and the difference between them. She showed Torres's custody note. She noted that the note had been in the file from the beginning. The presiding judge stopped Diana mid-presentation and asked the prosecution to respond to the time zone conversion issue. The prosecution requested a recess. The recess lasted 40 minutes. When the hearing resumed, the prosecution conceded that the timestamp had been misread and that the forensic analysis required revision. They did not concede that the conviction should be vacated. They argued that even with the corrected timestamps, sufficient evidence remained to support the original verdict. The presiding judge said, "I am not prepared to accept that position on the basis of what has been presented today." The conviction was vacated pending a full re-examination of the forensic evidence by an independent expert appointed by the court. I am not free. The charge has not been dropped. The re-examination is ongoing. I am out on appeal bond, which means I can work, which means I can sit at my own desk and read the forensic report that convicted me and annotate the errors in it and send those annotations to Diana. The partial win is that the court acknowledged the error. The partial loss is that acknowledging the error and dropping the charge are not the same thing and may not happen at the same time. Torres retired 6 months ago. He sent me a message through Diana's office. It said, "I wrote what I saw. I hope it helped." It did. It was the first piece of paper in the whole process that reflected what actually happened in that custody suite, and it was written by a man who had no obligation to write it and wrote it anyway, because it was what he observed. There is a second part to this story. I will tell you what the independent forensic review found when it is concluded. I will tell you what the prosecution does with those findings. I will tell you what the charge becomes when the evidence it was built on has been properly examined. I know what it will show. I have been in this field for 14 years. I know what UTC and EST look like on a log, and I know what happens when you confuse one for the other. The examiner will find what I found in 40 minutes in a prison visiting room 16 months ago. The question is what the system does with that finding, and that is part 2.